everybody. This is Dr. Lori Shemek.
And I'm Omar Cumberbatch. You're listening to This Podcast Burns Fat. Hey, Lori, how are you today?
Hi, Omar. I'm doing wonderful. Thank you. How's life treating you?
Yeah, no
All of you.
complaints. Yeah,
Yeah?
no, everyone's good. No complaints
Good.
at all.
Same here. Yeah, even my puppy. Do you know my dog has gone from dark red as a puppy to like a lightest white reddish color? It's really crazy.
How'd that happen?
I don't know. It's like unbelievable. I mean, she's like white on her face and her front arms, and the rest is like a light apricot, right? It's really strange.
Are
So
you worried or is that something?
no, it's just part of her coat changing. All dogs' coats change,
Oh,
when
okay.
but not to, I don't know, this degree.
Yeah.
Is
Wow,
this
it's
the
first ever.
dog I expected? No, she's so cute though. She's still really cute.
Oh, that's good. That's good. All right, I'm glad
Yeah.
that she's okay.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. So today we have Dr. Steven Sideroff on, and he is the author of the best-selling book, The Nine Pillars of Resilience. And he was really wonderful on our show. He feels that becoming resilient is key, and having a healthy life, optimizing your health will provide that resilience, but it goes even deeper than that. And in order to optimize your life, you absolutely do need resilience, don't you?
No, no, absolutely. And I think that,
Yeah.
it's always good to have a framework, and those are where the pillars
Mm-hmm.
coming into play, and he really explains it very well. So, yeah, let's jump into the show. I think the audience is
Okay.
gonna love it.
Sounds good.
Here we go. Hey, Dr. Sideroff, welcome to the show. How are you today?
I'm doing great, and it's a pleasure to be here with both of you.
Well, thank you. We have been looking forward to having you on, and so we thank you for showing up. Really, really great. And we one thing I think is really important for everybody is mental wellness, and you truly offer that on a silver platter. Your book is incredible. The Nine Pillars of Resilience. The Path is the name of the book, Mastering the Nine Pillars of Resilience and Success. And if we all want anything in life, it's to be healthy and to have that success, that resilience. And but sometimes we just need a helping hand at it, right?
Well, we are all challenged in so many ways by the stresses we face in our lives. And if there's one thing that in turn challenges mental health, it's chronic stress. It challenges
Hmm.
mental health and physical health. So it's a great topic for us to be talking about.
No, definitely, and it's so relevant in this day and age. So
Yes.
what made you come up with this concept and write this book?
Well, when I got in, I started my career in brain research. And when I shifted into clinical work, I looked at what I felt was the key to good health and the key to the cause of the strain on our ability to have good mental and physical health. And I realized that that was chronic stress. And so I wanted to deal with what I thought was the thing that most impacted all of our lives and give tools to help people become more balanced and more capable of the process of self-regulation, keeping themselves in a place of balance. Because when you're in a place of balance, you handle everything better. And so that led me on a huge journey of, working with people in chronic stress and managing stress, and then realizing that we all have tremendous resistance to dealing with stress. And that took me on this whole path about why we have all of this resistance, which I hope we can get into. But ultimately, it led me to developing and creating a comprehensive model of optimal functioning, which I call resilience.
Oh, I love that. That is so wonderful. And it also led you to developing the 9 pillars, correct?
That's right. So the 9 pillars are a model of everything that I believe goes into living your best and healthiest life. That if you follow my principles and you take some of the steps that I talk about in my book that put you on the path of optimal functioning, you will handle stress and become more resilient through by following that path, that program.
And that's so important because so many people are struggle with stress, and it becomes a vicious cycle, actually. And also it's unhealthy, and it promotes weight gain and poor metabolic health, and the list goes on, and inflammation. And so I think, if you're going to start taking care of your health, we also must start taking care of our mental health.
Yeah, absolutely. One of the tracks of my career that began as soon as I was in clinical was in addiction. And one of the things that I learned very early on, which is in line with our conversation here, is that when you're in recovery, the one thing that challenges recovery the most, that makes you more vulnerable to relapse, is stress, chronic stress. So no matter what we're talking about, it all leads back to being able to handle stress in the best possible way. But it's important to realize that and this is amazing, that we're actually geared to failure in this. Believe it or not, we're geared to failure.
You
You know,
mean in living as a human in
living as
terms?
a human in in the society that we've developed to this point, evolution is designed to help us adapt perfectly to our environment, which we
Mm,
did 100,000 years ago. However, evolution works very slowly. But look how quickly our civilization has advanced, and it continues to
true.
advance, and the speed of advancing actually increases exponentially. So we've way outdistanced the fight or flight mechanism that we evolved to use to handle survival and stresses in our lives. So we mobilize every time we worry about something, every time we have a deadline, every time we have a bill to pay, we mobilize for fight or flight. But then, since none of our stresses require all of that buildup of muscle activity, muscle tension, we then have to come along and hold that energy in. So doubling the energy used in order to deal with the stresses of our lives. That's only one of a few mismatches and structural mismatches that I've identified.
That is so really interesting. And just one follow-up question. Is this buildup, if you will, is this all of this subtle, this stress? Or I mean, even nowadays, is it just a subtle
Well,
uh
I sometimes refer to chronic stress as the silent killer, but some of that is because we don't pay attention. Some of that
uh
is because there's so much noise in our life, so much going on in our lives, so much activity that it distracts us from noticing some of the signals in our body, such as raised tense shoulders or a tense jaw or our heart beating a little bit faster. So we don't pay attention, we don't notice, but that doesn't stop the effect of the activation and the accumulation of this activation.
Yeah, those are a couple of good examples that I think I was going to
yeah.
follow up because obviously, it presents itself that way. Can you talk about how it presents itself as far as disease and other physical ailments that we may not recognize or contribute to stress specifically?
Yes, absolutely. So think about your day, think about your life, and notice how many times during the day, perhaps one time after another, that you're faced with some uncertainty, challenge, danger, something that mobilizes your stress response. Now, think about all the times in your day, in your life, where you get a signal you're safe. You can let down your guard, right? How many of those
Yeah.
do you have in your life, in your day?
Right.
And
Exactly.
so if you think about that imbalance, whereas optimally your nervous system is designed to activate to a stress, the sympathetic branch of your nervous system, and then shift into the recovery parasympathetic branch to restore all the resources used up during the stress response. However, while that's the optimal, what happens in our day is that we handle a stress, and even if we do well and handle it successfully, instead of recovering, giving our bodies the time to recover, we immediately turn to the next stress and again activate the sympathetic branch of our nervous system. Now, if we grew up in a challenging, stressful, negative environment in childhood, now, in addition to the challenges of the day, whenever we don't have a challenge, we're looking for it. We're looking for the next one because we've been conditioned to look for it. And so again, you see this imbalance. And I've talked about this as the autonomic dysregulation syndrome, that literally heats up our body. It creates more inflammation in our body. It causes more oxidative stress in our bodies. It causes all kinds of breakdown throughout our bodies. So, we talk about, in longevity, they talk about the 12 hallmarks of aging.
Mm-hmm.
And in my talks, I talk about how chronic stress is the master hallmark of aging because it influences all other 12 hallmarks of aging. And so that is the process by which chronic stress leads to all kinds of physical symptoms and illnesses.
That is great. I love that. It should, yeah, they should put that in there, in that list of the hallmarks of aging.
Right.
But so let's just say you're somebody who is under a lot of stress. You want so much for yourself. You want so much for your life. You don't have the time. You have outside influences. And how do you help somebody maybe stop sabotaging themselves or eliminating those critical thoughts or somehow just setting them on the right path? And I don't know if that's probably too simplistic, but what do you say to somebody that is struggling right now?
Well, first of all, when start working with someone who's struggling, I have them take my questionnaire. It's my resilience questionnaire that when they take it and we score it, we find which are the areas of their strength and which of the areas are needing further development. And as I mentioned to you, I will offer my resilience assessment profile free to all of your audience.
Yes.
But that's the first step. Where am I starting? What's my starting point? The next step has to do with mindset. And there are a few key, my mindset is my fifth of 9 pillars of resilience. But for this conversation, we can start with that. And so,
Okay.
first thing that's important about mindset is you want to have a growth mindset. And with a growth mindset, it means that whatever shortcoming you're noticing, or even the fact that you're struggling with stress, a growth mindset says, I don't have to be stuck here, that there are things I can learn that help me move out of this stuck place that I'm in. So that's the first part of a growth mindset of my fifth pillar, mental balance and mastery. The second aspect of that is I have redefined the stress response and I have redefined resilience.
Oh,
So,
wonderful.
so now let me have you think about all of the successes you've had in your life. And I invite your audience to do the same thing.
Okay.
And I guarantee that all of you will recognize that all or almost all of your successes have been associated with stress. Now, one of my early mentors, one of the pioneers in neuroscience, Donald Hebb, said, neurons that fire together,
Yeah.
wire together. And so all of us unconsciously through our lives have learned that stress is associated with our success. And our brain doesn't know the difference, so it assumes that if I stress myself, that's gonna lead to success. And so this is the conundrum that we all face, that we have made that connection. And
Could it
so,
be just maybe could it be a just an ability to survive, having that stress? You know, I'm trying to think of the right words to say it, but back in the day, we needed that stress.
well, here's the thing. The thing is that stress is not all bad. That stress does help us with whatever goals we have in life. However, and therefore I've redefined stress and the stress response as a useful tool, because in our brains we experience it that way. But here's the key. There's a stress sweet spot, a level of stress that helps us function at our best. When we go past that sweet spot, we hit red flag territory of poor
Mm-hmm.
performance and poor health. And so people have to learn how to find their stress sweet spot. And I'll give you one hint. Right now, it's less than the level of stress response you're engaged in. Now, here's the other lesson of my mental balance and mastery, and another redefinition I've done. Resilience is not the ability to bounce back. It's the ability to bounce forward. Now, let me make that distinction. Bouncing back means you go back to the lessons that you have,
Oh, I love
which,
that.
which are
Yeah.
the lessons, which are the lessons of childhood.
Right.
Now, I don't know about you, but I can't say that I got the best lessons in my childhood
Right.
because my parents didn't know the best lessons, right?
Right. Right.
Okay. So, but we keep going back to those lessons to handle the next stress. And I'm going to give you an interesting example. I had a client who always got anxious and worried before she was going to take a test. And she would worry and get anxious that she wasn't going to do well. She'd lose sleep the night before. She would take the test and she'd worry that she did poorly on the test. And then she'd get the results back and she got an A. Or I should say, I asked her, well, what kind of results do you get? And she said to me, I always get A's. Now, that's a head scratcher, right?
Yeah, right.
But it's illustrative of what happens with all of us. You can be anxious. What's going to happen today? What's going to go wrong today?
Yeah.
And at the end of the day, nothing went wrong. Neurons that fire together wire together. So these people have put together anxiety, worry, tension, and things turning out okay. Not consciously, it's not a conscious connection, but this is what our brain does. And so we all have these associations with whether it's anxiety or worry. And so what I did with this one woman that I was working with is I had her begin to own her success. I had her begin to recognize and focus in on how she always did well so that she can redefine herself and her ability. This is bouncing forward.
Oh,
For her to say, you know, I'm somebody that always gets an A. I'm
yeah.
I'm
That
pretty
is,
good. I'm pretty good at this. That means I don't have to worry before my tests.
it's just changing the perspective, but how fascinating.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
So
Good.
that's one of the starting points of helping people is
Mm-hmm.
shifting mindset, identifying ways that we think about things that don't serve us.
It's interesting that while you were describing her, I was thinking of my own issues. I have a OCDs out there, you know what, right? So it's
Uh-huh.
like, and I understand in your book that you do talk about like superstitious behaviors and just
Yes.
unnecessary behaviors. And I was curious to see how that plays into a lot of things because we do end up doing things, or we actually turn bad behaviors into habits that really just like stress us out and really have repercussions
The
in other
vicious
areas of our
cycle.
life. It really
Yeah.
is.
Yes, exactly, exactly. And so the next step in the process of learning to be what I refer to as on the path, and I use the term and the construct of on the path because when people approach this, just as Lori, when you asked me the question, people come to me, people go to anybody else in this situation, and they feel overwhelmed.
Mm-hmm.
How do I get out of this stuck place? Because look at all that's going on in my life. I have to deal with these financial issues. I have to deal with, my business issues, my family issues, poor sleep, et cetera, et cetera. And people feel overwhelmed. And so a lot of times people give up too soon in the process because because of being overwhelmed or because they say, well, it's not working. And so I define the path as something that's alongside of you every moment of every day. And all you have to do is take a few steps based on the lessons in my book, which you can use as a handbook for optimal functioning. And you take a few steps, and if you take a few steps, that puts you on the path. And that's success. You've
Oh, yeah.
succeeded today. You can feel good because you took steps that put you on the path, and you know that that path is taking you in the right direction. So it's a way of helping people feel less overwhelmed and more confident that they can follow this program to lead to success. But
Wow.
I also tell people that if you feel upset about anything, I guarantee you can trace it back to some negative, critical, judgmental message you're giving yourself. And this leads us into a conversation about my first pillar of resilience, which is your relationship with yourself. And most of us have an inner voice that develops out of the lessons of our childhood, what I refer to as our primitive Gestalt patterns.
Mm-hmm.
That's going to be negative, judgmental, that when you walk into a room may tell you, oh, people are going to be judging you, or may say you're going to make a mistake, or some kind of statement that actually adds to your stress.
Mm-hmm.
And so I tell people, when you feel upset about anything, find the negative statement that you're giving yourself. And that's coming from your current, your old existing internal voice. And now what I want you to begin doing is identify the qualities of a healthy internal voice. So,
Oh, I love that.
so for me, the qualities of a healthy internal voice, in a sense, a healthy internal parent, the parent we all would have loved growing up with, right? And
Right.
parent, that parent comes from a place of love, compassion, acceptance, support, care, and joy. Those are the qualities. So now you have a model. Every time you catch yourself in the negative inner voice, you want to set a boundary. No, because that doesn't serve you. But now you have another place to go. You're not just saying no to something and then, well, what do I do now? Now you go over to this other healthier internal voice coming from those qualities, and you speak from that place. So, for example, if the negative voice is beating you up because you made a mistake, the healthy internal voice has compassion. Hey, I'm sorry that you are suffering so much because of that mistake you made, and talks from this place of love and compassion. And what we know from real psychological research is that we get better results when we come from that place than from beating ourselves up.
Being self-critical. Yeah, and I would say most people are self-critical on a
Yes.
daily basis. Yeah. It's really sad, and some more than others, actually.
Yeah. And so here you already have some initial steps to take on the path toward greater resilience, the mindset and relationship with yourself.
How wonderful. And I was going to ask you, so if let's say somebody comes to you and they're overweight and they're feeling unhealthy, all of this that you're talking about can help them get onto a new path, if you will.
Absolutely. And
Mhm.
it begins with somewhat of a paradox. It begins first by, again, one of the qualities of the healthy internal parent. It begins by accepting where you are at, something that's so difficult for people. How can I accept this? I'm overweight. How can I accept this? I'm making all these mistakes. When I say acceptance, I don't mean you like where you're at. I don't mean you're condoning where you're at. I'm simply using it as a point of reality. Here is where
Mhm.
you are at. Start by accepting it, because what most of us do, most of us, okay, we're on a journey in life and we're somewhere along that journey.
Mhm.
But most of us feel we should be further along, right?
Right.
I shouldn't have made that mistake. I should have known better. I should have done this better. All of these statements are undermining statements, because every one of them says where I'm at, there's something wrong with where I'm at. There's something which leads to there's something wrong with me. I'm not okay. I'm defective. If
Which
I
means
should be
stress.
if I should be further along the path and I'm not, then it's my fault, as opposed to starting with a loving, accepting, compassionate acceptance of where I'm at. I want to get further along, but the fastest path to get further along, to get where you want to get to, is by first being accepting of where you're at right now.
Because if you're not accepting, then you're still resistant to change.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah, so I'm really thinking that this voice thing is probably the key to most people's issues at this point. And I know I have my own voice. So like what do we do to kind of retrain that? Because a lot of it is just instinctual and it's just almost automatic at this point because we've been living with it for so long. What
You
kind of
when you say voice, you mean the habits like
Well, like
uh
yeah, I guess that voice is just not the loving parent that you wanted.
oh, right,
Your
right.
The
internal
existing one.
dialogue. Yeah. Like
Yeah.
how do you begin to make it turn? Because again, like a lot of the stuff is just automatic. You make a mistake, beat yourself up. I always
Hmm.
I forgot where the quote came from, but it was basically something along the lines like you would never talk to anybody else like that internal voice
Right.
it talks to you. So
I've seen that before too. Yeah.
Yes,
yeah,
exactly right, Omar. And so I want to make a little correction of what you said. Yes, it is the automatic, it is the conditioned voice, but it's not the instinctual voice.
okay.
So I want to make that distinction very clear to
That's an
people.
important one. Yeah.
It's very important because it is a learned behavior. It's the voice of our primitive Gestalt pattern that develops out of the lessons of childhood. Now, we don't go around sampling hundreds of families when we're growing up to see what's the best or right approach.
What's the
Our
best
little,
voice?
yeah. Could you imagine this little girl, little boy walking around and interviewing
Yeah.
parents down the street?
So
Now,
funny.
our little family, our primary caregivers, the people we're dependent on, are the people we trust the most, and we learn the lessons the most. And that's why, for so many reasons, why it's so hard to let go. So these get imprinted as survival lessons. That's why they are embedded so deeply, because of that and because in the first years of our lives, when we're laying down the basic neural network, those are the lessons that go in. So we have two most important patterns. One is the primitive Gestalt pattern I'm talking about, but the other, to our salvation, is neuroplasticity. That's the brain's ability to change with learning, to change with focus, to change with intention. But the key here, so it's just as a powerful force, and we could literally rewire our brains. But the key here is, if you think about how embedded the pattern is, that is how persistent, consistent, and courageous we need to be to establish healthy new patterns. It's an ongoing process. That's why, in my book, I lay this out as an ongoing program for people to do step by step. So you pick up my book and you read 5 minutes to 10 minutes. You pick up one of the tasks, one of the ideas, and you follow that throughout the day. And that puts you on the path. And little by little, you begin strengthening those new pathways with the old pathways letting go. But you have to be persistent and consistent with it.
Yeah, and that's really great that you said that, because it's about, like you said, neurons that wire together, fire together, right?
Fire together, wire together.
Yeah, and
They
in the
have to
same
fire
thing.
first, and then they'll wire.
Okay, I will never forget that now. But it's the same as the habit forming is just like that. I mean, it's just, when you're consistent, you do things over and over again, you will be developing new neurons and
Yes.
connections rather.
Yes. So the gateway to neuroplasticity is my seventh pillar of resilience, which is presence, being present. So if you're going to break any kind of condition pattern, any kind of long-term learning pattern, you first must be present. Otherwise, you'll take the same route you've taken your whole life. So I liken it to every time you come up to a challenge, a stress, a problem, it's like you're coming up to a forest. And this forest has one path that's well worn. And automatically, if you're not present, you go down that well-worn path. The only problem is it doesn't get you where you want to go. Right? And
Right.
so and so you come up to the forest, and you have this problem, and if you're present, you go, wait a second, I'm not going to listen to the old voice. I'm not going to listen to the old pattern and head down that path. I'm going to go over here. And even though it's a thicket, I'm going to pull out my machete and I'm going to start chopping away over here to create a new path. And every time you come upon, and this is bouncing forward, learning the lessons of each experience and trying new ways the next time with the support of your healthy internal parent. And if you do that and you stay with it, gradually the new path will start to take form and the old path will start to grow weeds and make it more difficult. And the brain works just the same way. The brain works just the same way. This interview that we're doing, this interview is, if people are paying attention, people's brains are going to be changed as a result of the lessons of this talk we're doing. It will start new neural branching in your brain. And all you have to do is continue on this path, and you will keep creating new neural networks.
I love that. I really do. I think, and just like anything else, it's, that pathway you're talking about, the path is, starts out, let's say it's tall grass, right? You walk over it once and you slightly bend the grass and you keep walking over it and it gets lower and lower. And eventually you have a habit, and you have a habit of consistency, thinking better, thinking differently, a different perspective. So I love what, and everything that you talk about is really developing new healthy behaviors. And I love that.
Yeah.
Mhm. So, Doc, I want to apologize because I know that the way the conversation is going, we kind of bounced around your pillars. So I think we started with seven, went to five. Can you talk about your pillars in some order, or does it require to have an actual order to it, or it's is really something that just over time that you incorporate throughout, and it's really not in a specific order that you need to do to get from basically A to Z?
Well, the beauty of it is that each pillar is an important step in becoming more resilient.
Okay.
And so I wanted to give your audience a good starting point. I mean, if you read my book, I have a few chapters that lead into the seven pillars, including doing the assessment and talking about neuroplasticity. But let me just quickly go through them. So we talked about the first, which is your relationship with yourself. And that, as I indicated, is about beginning to notice the negativity in your existing internal voice and beginning to say no to that and beginning to shift into this voice that comes from those positive, loving, that positive, loving place. The second is our relationship with others. And this is about making discriminations between healthy relationships in which you're with a person that you feel safe with, that you know is not judging you, and you could therefore you can let down your guard and receive emotional nourishment versus someone who may be judgmental of you, critical of you, or negative, or a person who's negative in life and sees the negative. And you want to spend less time with those people. And when it's interesting when I say this to an audience, a lot of them begin to chuckle because they're thinking someone close to them in their lives is like that. And so,
True.
again, it doesn't change the fact that if that's the case, you want to minimize time with those people. And when you're with
Hmm.
them, you want to make sure you set a good psychological boundary where you don't absorb unconsciously their negativity, where you put a boundary so you don't take that energy in. The third pillar is relationship with something greater. And the relationship with something greater is could be spirituality. It could be having purpose and meaning in life, and it could be giving service. It's something that connects you to the larger community. This is highlighted in all the studies looking at blue zones, communities where people live a long life, and they all have good relationships and community. The next three have to do with organismic balance and mastery. And the first is physical balance and mastery. And we talked about how we trigger the stress response frequently, but rarely in our day do we have stimuli that trigger the recovery branch. And so what this requires is practicing some form of relaxation, meditation, biofeedback, something that retrains you to go into the parasympathetic recovery response, to come down the continuum of activation into deep calm. Also, it's finding times in your day that you could say, right now, I'm in a zone of safety and I could let down my guard. And even if it's 5 minutes between one event and another event, if you could take 5 minutes and say, for the next 5 minutes, I'm safe, I could let down my guard, that contributes to restoring some level of balance. And I encourage everybody to have a zone of safety whenever they sit down to have a meal. So many
I
of
love
us
that.
in our society have gastrointestinal problems. And one of the main reasons I believe is that we sit down to eat when our digestive system needs to be activated and we're worrying about something, problem solving, otherwise, or even doing our work. So we have our stress response engaged. And when you have your stress response engaged, it automatically shuts down your digestive system.
I know for me, for sure, that's true with me because if I get stressed, I'm not hungry at all.
Yeah, yeah, right.
Yeah.
And so the fourth pillar, physical balance and mastery, is getting these two parts of your nervous system in balance and finding your stress sweet spot. Um, Let me say one more thing. So, we can be relaxed and then we get engaged in the world again, and within 5 minutes, we're tense again.
Mm-hmm.
And so we want to use some kind of cue in our lives. And I like to use portals, doorways, because we're always going in and out of doorways as a signal to check in with your body. How are my shoulders? How's my jaw? How's my breathing? Let me breathe in a relaxed way for another moment or two. Let me do something to calm myself before I go inside this room or out of this room. The next
Love
one,
that.
which we talked about already, is mental balance and mastery, a
Mm-hmm.
positive mindset, a growth mindset. And then the next one, which is also so very important, is emotional balance and mastery. And this, you know, from your perspective, all about emotional eating and
Mm-hmm.
how emotions throw us out of balance. And so here it's about not carrying any emotional unfinished business. And that
Which
means,
is dire for many people to let go.
yes, yes. And that means if you're carrying a grudge, if you're carrying a resentment, it's to realize the only person being affected by you carrying that is you. And so for your own good, not to let someone else off the hook, but for your own good, it's in your own best interest to find a way to let go of whatever emotions from unfinished business, either from yesterday or your childhood, you need to let go of. And in my book, one of my chapter on emotional unfinished business or emotional uh, mastery, I go through a step-by-step process to help people let go of old unfinished business, which is so important so you're not carrying any excess baggage. The next pillar, as I mentioned, is presence. And that's noticing, being aware of what's in your environment, being in the present moment, not up in your head, worrying, thinking, problem solving. The more time you're in the present moment, the more time you're able to bounce forward, because that's the time where you notice, that's the time where you actually could make a difference in your life. You can't do it when you're up in your heads. The next pillar is flexibility. And there are many parts of flexibility. One part is being able, if there's an obstacle in the way of you achieving a goal, flexibility is being able to either shift your goal for easier success or shift your goal so you avoid the obstacles, or shift the path you're taking so you sidestep those obstacles. Flexibility is also flexibility of perspective. It's being able to shift perspective so you could see a problem from a different angle and have better ability to solve it. And all of these pillars that I'm identifying, we will engage in better if we're managing our stress. And finally, the ninth pillar, which in business in our lives is what we sometimes think of the most, which is power, the ability to get things done. For me, it sits on top of a pyramid of my other eight
Mm-hmm.
pillars. And it's being able to set goals, have the courage to overcome fear, to move toward your goals, be persistent, consistent, concentration, and focus. And there's my 9 pillars. And when you put them
Wow.
all together, they will result in people having their best, healthiest, most successful, happiest, and healthiest life.
5 minutes a day, step by step.
That's
I
right.
love that. I think that's wonderful. And also, I would like for you to let our audience know that you have a gift for them.
That's right. So for everybody in the audience, I sent you the link, and maybe you could share that with
Yes.
everybody. But it's my free resilience assessment booklet, which describes my model and each of the pillars of my model. but it also contains a questionnaire that people can take, self-score, and derive their personal resilience profile so they can see their areas of strength and areas needing further development. It's really an eye-opener.
That's
Yeah,
what we need.
yeah, I can't wait to take that
Yeah.
assessment. So, Doc, you've been fantastic. That'll
Oh,
definitely
yeah.
be in the show notes. But I do want to give you an opportunity as well to just let people know where they can get in touch with you, and any social media handles, your website. Obviously, we could get this book on Amazon, but yeah, anything that you want to leave us so that we could keep up with all the great stuff you're doing.
Of course, of course. So my website is drstephensideroff.com. That's drstephensideroff.com. And I also have a 15-minute audio relaxation visualization exercise on my website that people can get free and
Nice.
download, and other good information about the topic we're talking about. And again, my book is The 9 Pillars of Resilience, The Proven Path to Master Stress, Slow Aging, and Increase Vitality. It's actually available at bookstores, but also online at Amazon and Barnes & Noble.
That is fantastic. You are just really a treasure, and a
Thanks.
brilliant one at that.
Thank you very much. I
So
appreciate it.
it's been really nice to have you on our show.
Yeah. Well, you're very
Thank you.
welcome. And, people that read the book write back to me and say that it feels like I was talking directly to them, because that was one of my goals in writing the book, is that I reach people where they're at so they feel like they can be successful in this process.
How lucky for people to have had you as a physician, a doctor, to help them. So
Well, thank you.
Awesome. All right, Doc.
yeah.
So yeah, have a great rest of the day.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank
guys
you.
too, and thank you for the interview. Great questions.
Thank you. You take
Thank you.
care. Appreciate
Bye-bye.
it. Bye-bye.
Thank you so much for listening to this episode of This Podcast Burns Fat. We're so excited to have you as a listener, and we're hoping that you really enjoyed the content as well. And if you did, please run over to iTunes and provide a rating and or review. It will go a long way in helping us continuously build our listenership up so that we can provide you with excellent content regarding fat loss, weight management, and just an overall healthy lifestyle. Thanks so much. Have a great night.